Hello and welcome to the Saltcast. My name's Ryan Johnson, and we're excited to have you guys here listening. Now, today I've got Danny Wright on with us. He is our Director of Sales and Marketing. Danny, welcome.
Thanks, Ryan. Good to be here again.
But today we've got a special guest with us. His name is Scott Letourneau, and we're excited to have him on. It's the first time we've had him on our podcast. And Scott, I was thinking for our introduction today that you could kind of introduce yourself. Tell us your story, kind of a personal level, professional level, and help our listeners get to know you.
Sure. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Danny. Great to be here with everybody. I'm excited to share a couple of distinctions, hopefully help you out in your business and some compliance things to simplify that for you. Yeah, to go back and share a little of my story. I grew up in a small town, Duluth, Minnesota, where it's very cold in the winter times, and youngest of six. Grew up in a big neighborhood. We had lots of kids, Catholic family. Everybody had, 6, 8 kids, so it was a lot of fun playing in the neighborhoods. Very sports-minded family, played hockey in the winter, tennis in the summer. My mom was a sports nut. All my brothers were 3 older brothers, 2 older sisters. We all competed in all types of things. So I think from the sports-minded point of view, you always have that competitive nature. And probably, a lot of families, maybe the father was the sports guy. My mom was just a sports nut. And I remember she was always about personal development improvement. There was a famous pole vaulter named Bob Johnson in the 52 Olympics that had a motivational training. One tape she'd hand out to all the kids in the neighborhood. It was how to change your weakness into power. I think the first speech I ever gave in school in 6th grade was part of his speech. So she handed out to all the neighborhood kids. Doesn't matter. You had to run faster, be better, do your best, and you could always improve. So it was a pretty cool experience. And, I from there went to the university there, had a business finance degree. I think I formed my first limited partnership in college. We started trading stock options with some friends. People thought we were kind of crazy, but we just kind of dove into it, figured it out, did some of those things. After college, I got a Series 7's license, so I actually was in the stock business for a while. And I was probably one of those guys, was more of a nice guy personality. I think the hard closer back in the 80s wasn't my strong suit, so I wasn't really successful in that area. My family is a family of entrepreneurs. My older brother owned multiple convenience stores and since retired. A lot of rental properties in Florida, and other brothers, very similar stories in our family. And so I ended up, I remember when I moved out of Minnesota, probably when it was about 15 below zero was the high temperature for a week. I moved down south. I was in Arizona for a year or two, moved to Las Vegas. Honestly, never thought I'd be in Las Vegas growing up in a very conservative town of Duluth, but been here since 1993. I love the energy from anything's possible here. It's an international destination. I don't gamble, so you can't live here that long and survive and be a gambler in Las Vegas. I don't think. There might be 1 or 2 exceptions. So, I've been married for going on 25 years, in business for 24 years. I like to say I've beaten the odds in both categories, first time in each one. So coaching's been good. And so when I got into the arena of forming companies and entities, I had experience in that in college with finance. And I had a friend of mine, he started a business in this arena. So I worked there for 4 years. And I'm more of a conservative type that likes to read the rules, the tax code, and sometimes some of you can relate to this. You've ever worked at a company where the founders are more aggressive. They really only care about profits and sales, not necessarily if it was the best or right strategy for the client. And that always kind of rubbed me a little bit the wrong way. So, like anything else, I left that company after 4 years, formed my own company in 1997. And there was some of the things I'd reflect upon that I was taught to share with other people. And again, some of you can relate to that. And so what I did when I started my company, I wanted to find an expert. This is important for you that are doing business. If you're looking for tax professionals or legal professionals, a lot of us just sort by our friends or family or who do you recommend. There's no criteria, right? You just pick anybody. So I knew if I had a certain strategy I liked and I wanted to promote, I could find almost any level accountant, if I looked hard enough, that would probably agree with it. And you don't realize in tax world, you can find very aggressive and very conservative. If you ever watch the show American Greed, you'll see a lot of examples of people that got way too aggressive and got caught, right? So what I did, I went to Deloitte and Touche because I figured they're one of the biggest in the world. And we were in Nevada, so we'd set up Nevada corporations, LLCs, plus other states. So I wanted to go to Deloitte and Touche and say, tell me more about these multi-state taxation rules. So I paid $400 to $600 an hour back in 97, 98 to consult with them for multiple hours to go through court cases, public law 86-272, and go through what solicitation of sales, what are the exceptions, what if it's a passive company that has LLCs, you're holding an investment. What does California look at if you're considered an employee, perhaps even though you're not, but they consider it a statutory employee, even though you have an LLC and you're the manager in California. What if you have a Nevada address? How does that come into play? So we went through all these court cases with big ones with Budweiser, different things, and so we really got into deep. So what I did is I created a lot of content about what doesn't work. So we got a lot of traffic to our website for many years of putting all the strategies or competitors, and I would say, where do you lose privacy? People wanted to know how you gain privacy. So, we would talk about, well, if you wanted to be a private shareholder and you capitalize a company from an accounting point of view, if you go to court, how is that going to be private? Oh, well, if it was a loan, then you don't own the company. What happens? We'd get into control groups. I have a very complex spreadsheet on control groups and having you'd have a California company with profits and you'd have a Nevada C Corp, you'd expense the profits. Then we'd get into the personal service corporation rules, all these complex things that, of course, a lot of this has changed the last couple of years with the new tax laws, and it'll probably change again this year. So I was just kind of really wanted to, and it can become an endless loop, because then I found an attorney to do research on court cases, because I was the type that didn't believe kind of what I read. And I realized from working with enough attorneys that you can have a certain interpretation of a rule, but at the end of the day, it's really how does the judge interpret that? So if you go reverse engineer, which what I would do, what's the judge going to say? So I hired an attorney to do legal research on court cases on different things about jurisdictional strategies, choice of law, choice of forum, contracts, different things. I even spoke at a national real estate convention. I did research on the Environmental Protection Agency and real estate owners, and so I talk about court cases and how you basically get screwed. And I'd like to start from worst case scenario and go up. Now that doesn't work always in life. My wife doesn't always like when I always talk about worst case scenario, because it kind of takes the fun out of stuff, and she's the fun person. I'm like, well, downside is this. I go, I just don't want to hear about the downside. So that worked really well from a business point of view and strategy, right? But not necessarily. So I have to curtail that a little bit in my personal life. I've learned that over the years. I've gotten a little bit smarter. So that just led down the road that we started to attract a lot of higher end marketers, people in internet marketing. In the early years, I had the opportunity to do a lot of it back in the day, teleseminars. I've spoken in Australia, New Zealand, the UK about setting up U.S. companies. So I had the opportunity to, again, you start getting into all these things. And like what I like to compare it is like playing chess. If you play chess, you can't think one move ahead, you're going to get destroyed, right? You got to think 3 or 4 moves ahead, and it's really strategy. And I think as an entrepreneur, I found early on that, probably 50% of entrepreneurs fail the first year, 95% fail within the first 5 years. So you only have a 5% chance of making it. Usually you work 80 hours a week. You don't see your family. You don't see your kids. And you'd probably be better off having a W-2 job and being a better employee. So that puts a damper on things. So from that point of view, our goal was to help you launch with confidence, have certainty because I studied a lot of psychology. I went to all the Tony Robbins events. I went to Mastery University back in 93 where you do the fire walk. I've done it like 4 or 5 times. Been at those different events. And And I found that really, accessing certainty is really important. So if you're not sure about your strategy or you hear different opinions, and today we have so much information, people are so overloaded, there's always this part in the back of your mind, you're wondering if this is going to be correct. Am I going to get a dreaded letter from some state tax agency? Am I going to get some letter from the IRS 3 years later? Is that going to destroy my brand in the U.S.? Am I going to have what happened to California recently, where they're going into bank accounts and just money disappears out of your bank account because of past sales tax dues? So I realized that we had to give people certainty and confidence. And, I actually did a training once many years ago. I studied NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, just really to study patterns when I interview accountants, attorneys, look at court cases, banks. I want to understand people's patterns of success. And I found that a lot of people just simply get overwhelmed in their business, and understandably so. There's a lot of information, right? Just this whole sales tax area by itself can get overwhelming. And so we did a training on how to overcome the pattern of overwhelm, which is basically, really if you get overwhelmed, we all do at times, is to stop, immediately prioritize and move forward. And we did the pattern of motivation, and we found that this was the if you peel the layers of the onion, this was the layer that people, when they're honest, would say, the reason I'm not moving forward in my business, I'm just simply overwhelmed. So we added that component to what we did. We studied financing and business credit. I formed a company called Fast Business Credit because it was another industry that had so much misinformation that I felt that, honestly, I think it would almost prey on people who are uneducated. And not uneducated from a bad point of view. It's just financing money is very emotional. And when you're desperate and you need to get money quickly to feed your family or to keep your business going, people thought business credit was like magic dust or something. And again, we would come and explain, well, it's not like magic dust. There are business credit bureaus. You can build a rating. You can get vendor credit that'll protect cash flow. But when it comes to a pattern of going to your accountant to start your business, we would find out that most accountants would say, okay, you're going to start this online e-commerce thing, right? Have you done this before? No, you haven't. Okay, you work full time. And the accountant's already thinking, okay, this guy's going to have a loss on their Schedule C, and we can write a little bit off against their earned income. So here's what we'll do. Since you don't have any experience, why don't you go ahead and start off as a sole proprietorship? It's really simple. And nobody argues with simple, right? We all want to have things simple. If somebody says this is going to be really simple, you're not going to go, oh, crap, that sucks. You're going to be like, okay, that's great. I want it to be simple, right? So, but what happens with the accountant when they start with that advice, which is very common because they're evaluating, you're going to make enough profits that if you say become an S Corp, we can save you some self-employment tax, right? So that makes sense from that point of view, but from a financing point of view, what does that sole proprietor do? How do they finance their business? They use a personal credit card, right? So they use the personal credit card, it jacks up the revolving debt, which is 30% of the credit score. It drives down their credit score. A year later, their business takes off. They form the S Corp or the LLC, tax an S Corp. Then they go to apply for a business credit card and they get rejected because the revolving debt's too high. And the business credit card is something that's not... yes, it's personally guaranteed, but it doesn't show up in your personal credit bureau. So we look at all aspects of this and we would say, okay, here are the sequence of events. Here's how you play this chess game properly. We're going to be 5 moves ahead. You're only thinking 1 move ahead, and that makes sense. And so the psychology came into play because you had to help people really understand why are you getting this one part, and that's 100% correct. But when you add these other 3 pieces, you might want to make this move laterally first instead of this move. And that's what I found was really important. And again, that's why we have the theme about launch with confidence, because if we can give you some certainty when you start your business, that certainty can overcome a lot of limitations. Maybe you're not the best salesperson, you're not the best copywriter, you're not the best at product design, but if you have more certainty, we found that you're more likely to be successful or not. So that just carried forward through the years and building great relationships. So I've been very fortunate and blessed over the years, had many ups and downs with, HR and management wasn't my strong suit. So I had to spend a lot of money in those areas to learn about those things and experiences. Some of you might be great leaders in that. So we all have our strengths and weaknesses, right? So So it's been a great journey, and it's I'm growing like you guys are and everybody else is. It's all about growth and what can you learn to improve and make better, and to make a difference for others.
All right, Scott. So one of the questions that I have that I think is that a lot of listeners will have is just say give us the elevator pitch, right, of your company. I don't think we even caught the name actually of your company. So tell us about your company. Like I said, just a quick summary of what you guys do.
Sure. So my main company is Nevada Corporate Planners, NCP. So we help people launch their business with confidence. And then we also have Sales Tax System, which is our other brand, which came into play in 2015, where we help simplify the sales tax registration process and all the steps that come before you file sales tax returns and some of the compliance things. So we help people with all those decisions that come into play for that. So those are the two main brands that we operate under today.
Nice. So on that note, as far as helping companies and set up and everything around setting up a company, and like you said with making sure they consider say 3, 4, 5 steps ahead, right, and really all those different factors. One of the questions that oftentimes that comes up all the time, in fact, with international companies is whether or not they need to set up a U.S. entity and a U.S. bank account. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, so that gets into another component of what we do, which is U.S. e-commerce expansion, right? So that's a very specific headline, and there's lots of steps that come under that. One of the first questions, as you mentioned, if I'm a European company who's been selling, you could be on Amazon in several countries in Europe, and you're looking to expand to the U.S., the largest market in the world. The question is, do you use perhaps your UK limited company to expand, which you can, or do you form a separate U.S. entity, typically an LLC? There are exceptions, so I don't like to have generalizations here, but let's assume that might be the option. So there are some factors to consider in that. And so keep in mind when you expand to another country, you are basically starting a new business. You should look at it as starting a new business. Now, you can expand through your foreign company. A lot of the sellers will look at, and what we do recommend is, are you looking to form a new brand? Is an extension of your brand. Let's say it's an extension of your brand. Are you concerned about liability in that market? So we know U.S. is the largest market in the world. We as U.S. Consumers love to spend money online. We love credit card debt. So we're a great market to sell things to. The downside to selling the U.S. market, we also love to sue everybody. And even though some product liability, most of the products will have low liability, there are some things that come into play. So some people that when they have a very successful brand in a foreign country and they launch in the U.S., they'll want to separate the U.S. liability from the foreign entity. So that's one of the reasons they may form a U.S. separate legal entity, is to do that, to separate the two. A lot of people have a exit strategy in mind. They see the fact that Amazon companies are being acquired very quickly, and although whether you're a foreign or U.S. entity, you can be acquired either way, because somebody acquiring your company is going to buy your assets, take over your account, take over your inventory. There is some advantages from a legal point of view dealing with contracts that if somebody's buying your company, the preference would always be to buy it from a U.S. company versus a foreign company, although those sales do happen, right? So there are many sales. So that's an advantage. A lot of people don't look at something like a nuance like liability insurance. Amazon has a rule, for example, if you do over $1 million in sales, you're supposed to have product liability insurance. They don't enforce it yet, but that's one of the things that may change here in the future. And it's much easier to get product liability insurance as a U.S. company versus a foreign. Is it possible? Yes, it's possible. Are the rates a little different? Yes, these things come into play. And then if we drill down to something like sales tax, where you get into, again, thinking 3 or 4 moves ahead, when it comes to sales tax compliance, the question is, do I need something like a U.S. bank account? Does that come into play? And the U.S. bank account's not required. A lot of foreign sellers, for example, will use one of our partners as Payoneer. They're a great company. They will sign up on Amazon through their foreign entity to use Payoneer to move their funds back. It'll save them 50% of the fees, and they'll move them to their foreign country in their local currency. So we recommend everybody has a Payoneer account. Separately, though, when it comes to sales tax, that's another strategy. So there are software companies that will automate some things out there, but they require a U.S. bank account to have an ACH pull. That's something a Payoneer doesn't do, so they can automatically do that. Now, so a bank account isn't required. And the good news, like for example, working with you guys that I love is the fact that we have a lot of foreign sellers that don't have a U.S. bank account. And some of the rules changed over the last couple of years. We do have an option that we can do it without travel. I'm realistic because I've worked in banking for 25 years. I know that's going to change in the future as there's more regulation, things of that nature. So if you don't have a U.S. bank account, and for example, if you work with you guys, Peisner Johnson, what I like is the fact that you're one of the only companies I know where you can wire funds to remit sales tax. So that makes it really easy to work with somebody like you guys, that for somebody who hasn't set up a U.S. bank account, which is required through a U.S. entity, you have to have the right U.S. address. It can't be a P.O. box. There's many nuances that you have to go through a checklist to make that accomplished. We can do all those things, of course, but it's nice to have the flexibility in working with you guys, for example, that if they don't have that, that's a possibility. So there's lots of components. Of course, a lot of people are weighing the costs. What's the cost for me as a foreign seller to come in the U.S. between, what are U.S. tax returns required? Do I need a tax ID number? What's my sales tax requirements? What are the cost of the sales tax returns? Then if I use the U.S. entity, how is it different? And so we're working on a tool and some things that go through those calculations. And it's fairly similar overall when you get through the first year costs. So it's really looking at, is there a strategic advantage to protect your brand and everything you're doing as you expand into a new country? So those are some of the components that people would want to keep into mind as they're looking to make that important decision as they expand. Can you do it one way and change later? You certainly can. Obviously, as you go through Amazon, some of you have experienced that you have to go through their, or any company, whether it's Walmart or you're on eBay, you're going to have to kind of update your tax settings and go through those things to make sure the account is moving forward. So there's different things when you activate a new account to make sure it's done right. Address is a big key in that versus if you're updating the account later. So again, this is part of that chess game where there's lots of moves to anticipate. And since we handle so many of these components of both sides, of course, we never recommend most people just go to a cheap online LLC provider. I got mine for $200. Man, you got ripped off. I got mine for $150 and I got mine for $79. That's one move ahead and a very dangerous game to play in the U.S. because if you make a mistake in the U.S., the IRS or state agencies, as you know, most states there's a 3-year statute of limitations to go after somebody. The states don't call you next week and say, hey, I see you filed this, but we saw a mistake, and before your penalties and interest accumulate, we want to notify you right away. The IRS doesn't do the same thing. They're like, we'll get to you 3 years later, and we'll send you a notice, and, then you'll pay the consequences then. So you want to really do this upright. You want to certainly work with someone that can anticipate these moves ahead of time so you can avoid a lot of these mistakes that can come down the road, especially, again, if you're building a brand properly. You want to, whether you go into the trademark process, all these components come into play.
Yeah, I really like that because, you ask what seems to be a simple question, right, of do I need to set up a U.S. entity? But it is not simple at all, right? It's not as simple as just saying, yes, I want to set up one and then go, like you say, to one of these online services. The key, I think, is to have the right discussion with the right people, and that's exactly what you guys do, Scott, right? Is a company can come to you and have this consultative approach, which we're a big fan of, right? I mean, we have similar messaging to the market, you could say, and to companies to say, look, don't make these decisions until you have all of the information in front of you and can make the best business decision, based on all these factors.
Yeah, and so we do that. We have maybe a slightly different way we look at it. So we have two different avenues. If you want to do a free consultation to to talk to our team about, what services do you do this? Can you do this? Are you able to help us in this situation? And then we would, yes, we can. And here's the service we can do. A lot of people come to us and they just simply want to jump right into strategy. How should I do this? What's the best move for me? Should I do this? Should I not? Then we have to take a step back, look at their situation, look at the revenue, look at the business, look at their end goals. So that we have paid strategy sessions, which I do every week. I have paid consultations where I'm involved separately from my team, where if they just, how's your virtual address service work? How's it different than these other ones? If you scan mail and send it to us, our difference is every piece of mail, you get a state agency notice or a banking notice, going to close down your U.S. bank account and get an IRS thing. We pretty much know how to respond to everything that we receive. And if we don't, we have a partner that we can refer you to that can immediately respond to get you help, versus you work with a normal low-end mail forwarding service. They'll forward your mail or scan it, but they have no clue how to answer anything if you have a real issue. We actually have our team looks at any urgent notices, anything that's shutting down things. With people's accounts being frozen, Citibank would have things about more compliance. Somebody's PayPal account's going to be shut down. We'll be able to notify them. They respond and say, what do I need? Well, you probably need a lease agreement, because you have the address. Let's send that to you. So those things are very strategic. So again, we do a lot of strategy stuff differently from, what's your basic services? How do you do things? And can you help us or not? If we can't help you, we'll be the first ones to say, that's not in our wheelhouse, but usually we have a partner we can refer you to.
I like that. Yeah, and there's certainly a lot more information that I think our listeners would want to get from you, as far as just your wheelhouse, your expertise. So we'll certainly have to have at least part 2 and maybe 3, 4, and 5. Right? We'll
Sure.
see how it goes, but. One thing I think would be good to kind of close this out. One of the main questions we always address with foreign companies when we're having, say an initial discovery call, or what's next call, as we call it, is around EIN, social security number, ITIN. Like, tell us exactly what's required to get registered for a sales tax permit in the States.
Yeah, so a lot of people get stuck on the fact that, which rightfully so makes sense, I'm going to expand to say Amazon, for example. Amazon doesn't require an EIN for foreign sellers, right? You'll fill out a W8BNE or W8BNE, one of the 2 tax forms, whether you're a foreign individual or a foreign company, right? So an EIN isn't required for that, but when it comes to sales tax compliance, the states do require an EIN number. Now, Tennessee recently made an exception where they have a little box where they'll say if you're a foreign seller, you don't need an EIN for the state of Tennessee, right? And Tennessee recently became a marketplace nexus state, so that or a marketplace state, so that changed in that particular state. But by and large, you do need an EIN number. And so the challenge is the foreign seller is like, okay, EIN, not a big deal. I can call the IRS. I see a lot of blog posts, call the IRS, walk through the form, and answer some questions. The challenge is there's some critical questions that have to do with even simply as when did you start business in the U.S., from the tax return or the reason for starting a business. And these things cast the die with the IRS, and there's no way to amend an EIN or the SS4 application. It's a very tedious process to file returns and communicate with the IRS, and we work with CPA firms that have done a lot of that before. So it's really important that when you need an EIN, you get it right from the start. And yes, it is required for sales tax registrations. And again, now you've kind of announced to the IRS that you're doing some type of business. You get into other questions about, are you engaged in the U.S. trade or business? I'll tell you how detailed I am. There was a blog post by a foreign tax attorney about this subject, engaged in U.S. trade or business. I paid a tax attorney $600 an hour for 3 hours to go through every word on that long blog post, and we found one sentence that was off. So, and we went through court cases on it. So that's just, you could, we're not playing horseshoes here. Close is good enough. You like to be accurate. Now, again, if you're the type that says, I'm going to take a risk and I don't think I'll get audited, that's honestly, that's not the best client for us. I mean, we understand if you want to be more aggressive, we're okay if you make that choice, but we're always going to start from a very conservative point of view. And the key is if you do take an aggressive position, just remember you got to have the right tax person, and in this case, mostly a tax attorney, to file your returns to represent you in case you get audited, which I'm okay with that. We have people that do that. It's just the fees are triple. Now, if you're okay with the triple fees and the results you get and you feel comfortable, that's a whole different decision. But we're not going to start off with something that's really aggressive, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Again, good information. We certainly deal with the same, you could say, kind of categories that people fall under, as far as where they fall on the spectrum. You could say on aggressive versus conservative. So it's yet another example. Wherever they fall on the spectrum, I certainly think it's important for them to have all the information they need to then take whatever approach
Sure.
they're going to take. So. Tell us, Scott, then wrapping up here, how do people find you? Email, website, what's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, the best way to reach out for the U.S. entities, you can go to launchwithconfidence.com. So launch, Launch, with confidence.com. That's our main website. You'll see all the services, the products there. You could email us support@launchwithconfidence.com. If you anything to do with the sales tax registrations or questions about that area, that's salestaxsystem.com. So salestaxsystem.com or support@salestaxsystem.com. That's the best way to get a hold of me too. We use Zendesk as a ticket system. We have a full-time person. The tickets come in every couple minutes. Somebody delegates those to everybody in our team. So it's a very detailed process, but it'll be handled quickly, and so that's how you get a hold of us. And if you can just mention my name, if you want to have a strategy call, my team will let me know. They'll follow up with a couple options for you to make payments, schedule a thing, or go from there. So that's the best way to get a hold of us.
Great, and we'll add some of this, of course, to the link, right? We'll add the links
Notes,
and everything we need to. So go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, just wanted to thank you again, Scott, for being on with us. It's always great to have a guest on with us, and we're definitely probably going to schedule some more podcasts with you, because I think we deal with foreign sellers all the time, and this is great information for them. I think we have a podcast similar to this that we did like 3 years ago. It was one of our most popular, so to get an expert like you on, I think, is great for our listeners. Again,
Awesome.
Scott, I'm going to add your contact information in the show notes, so make sure. And if this is something that you guys need, make sure and reach out to Scott. And with that, thank you so much, and we hope to see you guys on another one.
Thanks, everybody.